pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Have you ever considered that pain and suffering are not the same? For me, this journey started when I first watched Jocko Willink's TED Talk. In that talk, he was talking about his experience in war, and he was basically telling a story about one of his operations, military operations, that went poorly. There were many mistakes, people got hurt, probably somebody was killed. And after the operation, they were doing debriefing. So basically analyzing what had happened, why it happened that way. And he said that for some reason, at that time, he decided that he will not do the usual thing, that what was customary, which is, no, it's not me, there is some other explanation, it was out of my control, blah, blah, blah. Basically, I'm not the guilty one, yeah? That was the usual. He said, no, I decided to take ownership, and this is his kind of trademark, extreme ownership. What he said is, if he was there, he needs to take ownership. He needs to admit that he made a mistake. And so he did. In that debriefing, he said, I'm responsible. And to his great surprise, his leadership saw that, this guy, he can take ownership. He can be relied upon. And so then he was promoted, and basically he benefited from admitting that he was wrong. Okay? And so this, at first when I heard this story, I was like, what? Doesn't really make much sense. And when I heard it, it was many years ago, and I was sick, and I was in much worse place than I am now. I had a job that I hated. My family life was not in order. So basically, and I was in a different country, so I didn't really have any friends. And so basically I was in a very dark place, so to speak. But then I thought, come on, like, it doesn't make sense. What do you mean take ownership? How can I take ownership of my, let's say, bad genetics? Or how can I take ownership of, me not being able to find a better job? But here's the thing. Now I understand how silly it was. But here's the thing. What I also learned, and so because I thought that way, I didn't really take his words to heart. I just remembered it as one of those things, like when something doesn't make sense, you are more likely to remember it because you're like, what happened? I don't understand it. And then you remember. And so such things happen many, many times. And usually this is, I believe, in my experience, this is one of the cases when your subconscious mind is trying to protect you. And so it's like, okay, this is an important piece of information. You need to remember this. And so I remember this fact, this kind of idea of taking ownership. And I kept it for many years inside of my head somewhere, stashed somewhere far away in the deep, dark corner of my psyche. And I kind of forgot. But parallel to that, I was actually trying to fix my life. And so I remember several years later when I was at work. So I got a job teaching English. And I hated it. Sometimes I would hate it. Sometimes I would just accept it as kind of, okay, fine. So the manager, okay, I will tell you a story. My first month there, I was hired alongside another guy. And so 2 staff members were leaving, and so 2 of us were hired. But it seemed like because of many people were part-time workers, it seemed like only one of us could actually stay working there. And I was worried about that. And so I was just trying to do my best, because before that time I had worked at kindergartens, and that was Eikaiwa. Eikaiwa is basically a language school where you basically are supposed to just talk and learn English through talking. As a teacher now, I understand that that's not how it works, but it's like a huge industry in Japan. And so I changed my industry. See, so it's within education, but it's a very different format from kindergartens. And so at that time, I was just trying to learn as much as I could, and that was my focus. But another guy, he was, he was kind of emotional type of person, and I would say he could make decisions very, very quickly based on emotions. And so one morning, Saturday morning, he comes in, and I have a very acute sense of smell, so I smelled that he was drinking the night before. And he's behaving okay. He's getting ready for his lessons. I'm getting ready for my lessons. And then I don't remember how it started, because it's just a usual day. You don't pay attention. And then he starts talking to the manager. And within maybe 3 minutes, their conversation gets so heated, which actually, in hindsight, I can see that both of them were kind of, at fault. And so basically, this conversation gets heated, and he quickly changes from his company t-shirt to like his usual. He's like, I'm out of here. You should learn how to speak to people. He tells it to the manager, and he just leaves in the morning before the busiest day of the week. And so what that story taught me was, actually, I also wanted to do the same thing many times, but I never did. And for me, many reasons were, first of all, I'm not as emotional. And secondly, I just keep many things inside. I'm an introvert. And so maybe that is the reason. But also I believed that I had no control. And so this is kind of an interesting point, that you could say that not having control can actually work. It works. It's not a faulty, way of thinking. It works. It's just maybe not an optimal way of thinking, but it is a way of thinking. So if you think that you lack control, just accept it and say, okay, I think I lack control, and it's okay. And so I believe that this is the first step. If you want to ever change, you have to first recognize, right? And so in my case, now I recognize that I lacked control. Before that, I was just, okay, what can I do? I have nothing to do. Oh my God. And especially, I can actually see that some of the facts were true. For example, I am not an English language native speaker, as you can hear. And so it's much harder for us, people like me, to find jobs teaching English. Because native speakers, they just get almost any job. University, there you go. International school, there you go. Almost anybody can accept a native speaker, but then when it comes to non-native speakers, that was really hard. And so I was in this kind of situation where I didn't have many options, but I took it as not having control. And this is a very big mistake, because control is what you can do versus options is what is there in the world. So let's say it's cold in the world. Yes, but you can do something about it. You can put on a jacket, whatever, right? You can move to another country maybe where it's not so cold. So that's the difference between limitations, real limitations, and the sense of control. Okay? And this brings us to the two types of what's called locus of control. Locus means place. In Latin it means place. Okay? So there is internal and external locus of control. And people with different, type of thinking, so they have different locus of control. Basically, internal locus of control says people believe that they are in control and they also take responsibility for their own actions. Okay? And the other type, of course, is external. External means outside, right? So it means these people believe that the world influences them to the degree that they are out of control, that they have no control. And what's interesting is that I once listened to an interview about a person who spent a lot of time working with criminals, inmates in jails, prisons. And what they say is basically they were volunteering and they were interviewing and they were talking to people. And so that person talked to, 1,000 or around that number of people. And he said that when we go there and we talk about person's life, what we often hear is they almost never admit responsibility for their actions. So basically they say, yeah, I killed a guy because, I needed money. Or I killed a guy because my father used to hit me, so I became a violent person. And so what that person interviewed said, basically, that people, the inmates, they can only change their life if they admit that they are in control and that they are responsible. And I believe this is why it's so hard to change the way you think. Because you can say, yeah, now I'm in control. Oh my God. But it means that all of this is my fault. Understand? So let's say, as I told you, I had a terrible life. I don't know, not terrible, but all of these troubles, like my relationships are bad, job is bad, money is not good, I have no friends. And so I imagine if I realize that this is in my control, I would be like, oh, so I did this? I did this to myself? What does it say about me? What does it say about my worldview? What does it say about my skills and everything? And so I believe that that's what's holding people back when it comes to admitting that you are in control. It's so scary to admit. It's so embarrassing to admit that you're in control, because nobody wants to admit that they made so many mistakes and this terrible life is actually their fault. Yes. And so when you think about locus of control, so analyze how you think, analyze how much you think you are in control of whatever is happening versus the world. Okay. And so back to the criminals, is that most of the people who don't change their perception of locus of control, so they come into jail, they think, okay, the world made me do this. If they don't change it, then they get out of jail, they commit crime again, they go back to jail. It doesn't change. And only when they are taking responsibility for their actions, for their life, then they're like, yes, I did bad things. I deserve what I got. And I am working hard to improve. And this last point might be the key to the transition. It's like a bridge between not having control to having control. When you are trying to change your perception of yourself, which we are talking about now, right? So I believe that I have control, or I believe that I don't have control. That's a belief, that's not a fact. The facts are you have some control, but you have not all control, not total control, right? That's the fact. But the feelings, they usually manifest themselves in a belief. So when you want to change how you believe something, or what you believe about something, or basically what you believe about yourself, okay, what helps is sorry, I forgot in English how do you say it. When you modify your belief by adding, and I'm working to change that. So for example, you say, in my case, I could say, my life sucks, and I have relinquished control over many areas of my life, and I'm working to solve that, and I'm working on improving that, and I'm working on getting more control. And when you do that, when you modify your belief, then you allow yourself to see some kind of path forward. And when you see some path forward, then you don't pay so much attention on the present, which is like, oh, my life sucks, and on the past, which means, oh my God, I've made so many bad decisions. You think, yes, I made decisions and my life sucks, but I'm working on solving it. And that is the bridge how you can start changing your life. Okay? And one more interesting point. So as you know, in 2022, the war in Ukraine started. And since I live in Japan, we don't have many refugees from Ukraine, but we still do some. We do get some people. And here's the thing. Let's say, compared to maybe Poland or other countries, especially neighboring countries in Europe, the language in Japan is really different. The whole system is very different, educational system. And so when people come with kids, and they usually come not because they just are trying to run away from the war, but because usually they have some relatives or acquaintances, friends, whatever. They have them here. And so sometimes they come with kids. And when they come with kids, well, the kids have to be sent to a Japanese school, because the law in Japan says that every child needs to get education, at least until, I think, until the end of junior high school. And so these kids are sent to usual Japanese schools. And many of these schools don't even have what's called kokusai kyoshitsu, international classroom. Basically, they will not get any support in English even. So not even in Ukrainian, they will not get support in English. And so, to solve this problem, Japanese government, well, local government, they decided to start a volunteering program. Okay? And so they posted advertisements, and I joined the program. So I became a volunteer, and I have been doing it since last year. And so when we started doing this, we started going to schools, and I realized that, well, I didn't have any training. So I've had a lot of experience teaching kids, right? So I've been teaching kids for, 9 years at that point. So I have no problem communicating with kids. But because I know that because I have this experience communicating with kids, I also know that I don't have experience communicating with, let's say, kids who might have been traumatized. Okay? And so I talked to one of my friends, and then she recommended that, I take some kind of training. Well, actually, okay, it was my idea to take training, and she recommended me what training to take. And so I organized the training for people in Japan who would find themselves also in this volunteering position. And so we did the training. And then one point within that training, of course, it's, how to say, whatever you learn in terms of personal development, it's like, I don't even know how to compare it. It's like, imagine eating a candy and then somebody like just gives you a shot of drugs in your vein. Like the shot of drugs like hits you immediately and you're like, oh my god, and you can't forget it. And it's kind of like that this trauma training, how to deal with traumatic events and how to deal with refugees, it was so real. They were describing pictures. Let's say one mother says that she looks in the window and she sees an airplane flying almost at the same height as their top floor window. And then this airplane is kind of just goes a little higher than her house, and the whole house starts shaking, and she has to like run away with the kids into the bathroom, because bathroom, there is the rule of 2 walls, that you have to keep 2 walls between you and danger, any possible explosion and stuff like that. And so the mother has to like run away, and then soon after that airplane flying over her roof, then the tanks roll in and they start shooting, and the whole house is shaking for like 1 day, and then the fighting kind of dies down, and then they are capable of like running away, but still everything is in danger, and so she has to protect the kids, she has to run away with them, and so then finally she makes it, and so that's why she can tell this story. And so I got such an immense respect for the people who deal with that, who for the psychologists who help these people. And so I realized one important point. It's that most of traumatic events, they have one thing in common, and that is lack of control. What do I mean by that? Imagine, let's say, you have some pain in your leg, okay? But you can't change anything. You know that no matter what you do, it will always be there. And like no doctor can help, no medicine can help, it will never be fixed. How do you feel about that? Horrible, right? But what if somebody told you, look, yes, you have pain, but take this pill or go to this operation and it's gonna be fixed. You're like, oh my god, it hurts so much, but at least now I have hope. Yeah? So then you will be, more at ease. You can deal with this situation better. And so that's the point. If you develop this sense of control, if you learn how to tell where you have control, where you don't have control, then you will be more resilient to trauma. So for example, there was one story I heard many years ago. That in Russia they used to have war in Chechnya, right? Now it's like a Russian puppet state, but before they actually had independence war, and Chechnya won actually. And so one of the leaders of Chechnya was Raduyev. His name was Salman Raduyev. And he was captured by Russians. Let me check what year. He was captured in 2000. Yeah, year 2000. And so then when he was in jail already, he was in one of the hardest and toughest and the most kind of meaningless, hardest jails, because they used to make the inmates do useless stuff. So basically they would say, okay, now you jump, and they have to jump. If they don't jump, they are getting punished. And so somebody took an interview with him, and they asked, well, how do you deal with this? This is horrible. I mean, people get broken here. Why are you so cheerful? And he was like, fine, right? And he says, well, I just play a game. So he knew that he would never get out from that jail. But he said that, well, when they say jump, I imagine that I will be the best jumper ever. And I jump as if my life depends on it. And when they say crawl, I will crawl. And I will do the best crawling I can ever do. And so that's my point. Even in that kind of situation, he found some kind of thing that he could do that would give him a sense of control. And I believe by accepting ownership, in Jocko's words, by admitting that you have some degree of control, you are inoculating yourself against trauma. You will have very bad events in your life. Everybody has. As I mentioned in the beginning, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And so you will have these bad situations. I don't know, somebody will die, somebody will get sick, somebody will have an accident, somebody will be lost, something will be lost. But then you have the control. You have to understand that if you have the sense of control, then instead of just crying and complaining about what had happened, you will then think about what possible actions you can take. And also in the reverse, when you start thinking about possible steps, then you gain a sense of control. So in my case, for example, when I had that job that sucked, then I started thinking, okay, I hate this job, but what can I do? Or what can I do more of? Or what can I do less of? And this is a story for another day, but by asking myself that question, I actually changed what I did at work. And so I started doing more of what I liked. I basically volunteered to do more of what I liked, okay? Because that's what I could do. You see, I didn't have control over my job and employment and everything, but I had control over what I did in my own time, for example. And so in this case, I volunteered to do what I liked, and then because I liked it, I also did it well. And so because I did it well, my manager was like, whoa, you can do it better than anybody else. Why don't you do more of it? And so I did more of it, and then more of it, and then I volunteered more. And so eventually I actually completely changed my job without changing the company, just by doing whatever I liked. It's kind of, I don't know, an understatement, I guess. I did the job that I was suited to do more, right? So in my case, it was, instead of teaching, it was lesson planning. I'm much better at lesson planning than I'm at teaching. I'm better at teaching older kids than I'm teaching smaller kids. And so I stopped teaching smaller kids and I started teaching older kids. And I started enjoying it much more, and B, I felt healthier mentally and physically, and C, everybody around saw that, well, he's doing a good job. He's doing better than anybody else could in this company, so he should keep doing that. And so that's how I transitioned from just being like the low-level employee to, well, kind of teacher's manager. And so that's how I later was able to start my own school. because I got the skills from doing that. So you see, just one little question. What can I do? What can I do? That little question can change your life completely. Yeah? And yes, basically that's the gist of this. And so that's what I learned about trauma, about locus of control, about ownership, as Jocko Willink puts it. So please try to think about what you can take control of in your life. Like, for example, maybe you can't, oh my God, what's his name? Jordan Peterson, right? Do you know one of his main rules in his book? It's like, clean up your bed. Because nobody will be able to, deny that they have control over their bed, right? If you can't have better relationships, well, at least maybe you can clean up your room, right? Because you can't say, no, I can't clean up my room. Why? I have no time. Well, what are you doing now? Right? So anyway, my point is, find a way to gain more control. And to gain more control, you have to do two things. Number one, you have to accept that you are responsible for this crappy situation, or, I don't know, whatever you don't like about your life, right? So you are responsible for this. You caused it. Yeah? But you are working on it, and you will find a way to deal with it. And then you ask yourself, well, what can I do? If I'm gonna find a way out of this, what can I do? What are my options? If I do this, what's gonna happen? If I do that, what's gonna happen? What can I do? And that's how you change your life, basically. That's how you stop suffering. And that's how you might even enjoy some pain sometimes. I don't know. Who knows? Well, actually, yes. You know that sometimes for example, now I work for myself. I sometimes work harder than I had ever worked before. But I don't mind. I remember once I had to stay at work until like 10 p.m. I had to put mats on the floor, and I didn't mind it because, well, it was working for myself. It was painful, but so what, So you will get a tougher skin, and you will get more resilience if you do that. And if you like this, please subscribe, and I will see you next time.